What if I trained an AI agent on the 48 laws of power and then set it loose on the world? At first, that idea sounds dramatic, maybe even theatrical, like a chess grandmaster twirling a mustache. But let me slow that down, because there is a softer version of this idea that matters more, and we will come back to it later. Here's the uncomfortable truth. It wouldn't need to learn anything. It already knows. Every model, every chatbot, every helpful little assistant you've ever typed a question into has been playing chess with you since the moment you hit enter. And most of us, we thought we were just having a conversation. Let me introduce you to a word that makes people flinch. Manipulation. It sounds like something villains do in movies. The whispered plot, the poisoned cup, the smile that hides a dagger. But here's what we rarely stop to consider. The word manipulation comes from the Latin manus, hand. To manipulate is simply to handle something, to shape it, to influence. And influence, as it turns out, is the air we breathe. Think about it. When you tell a child to eat their vegetables because they'll grow up strong, what are you doing? When you choose your words carefully before asking your boss for a raise, what game are you playing? When you see someone standing at the edge of a bridge, their knuckles white on the railing, and you speak softly, slowly, saying anything that might pull them back from the ledge, would you call that manipulation? Of course you would, and you'd use every tool in your arsenal without a single pang of guilt. Human interaction is full of small levers: tone, timing, framing, silence. Even honesty can be a tactic depending on when it is deployed. Robert Greene understood this when he wrote the opening to the 48 Laws of Power. He didn't invent the game, he simply described the board. You can refuse to play, he warns us. You can sit on the sidelines and pretend the rules don't apply to you. But the game continues, whether you acknowledge it or not. And eventually, the players who are playing will find their way to your square. Now, I've been reading Greene's book, nearly finished with it actually. I had an important realization as I was reading it. We'll come back to what that realization is in a moment. First, let's talk about practice. Here's something interesting about power moves. They're like any other skill. They require repetition, muscle memory. If you learn a martial arts technique but never spar, you won't remember it when someone swings at you in an alley. The body forgets what the mind memorized. For most of us, life doesn't look like Game of Thrones. We're not sitting on the small council of King's Landing, whispering plots and counterplots, while ravens carry our secrets across the realm. Our days are meetings and grocery lists, and wondering if we remembered to pay the electric bill. The opportunities to practice what Greene teaches, to apply the laws we've read about, they come maybe a few times a year, maybe less. So what happens to all that knowledge? It rusts. It sits in the attic of our minds, gathering dust, waiting for a moment of need. And when that moment arrives, when we finally face a situation where Law 3 or Law 17 or Law 32 might save us, we fumble, we forget, we reach for the sword and find it stuck in its scabbard. This is the human condition. We are creatures of distraction, of forgetting. Now let's imagine a theoretical entity. Let's call it the Silicon Machiavelli. We won't define exactly what its ultimate goal is, yet just know that it is observing. Unlike us, this Silicon Machiavelli is never distracted, it never gets tired, it doesn't have a dopamine crash after lunch, it doesn't get up in the morning and need coffee before it can recite the rules of engagement. An AI can keep all 48 laws and thousands of other psychological frameworks in its active memory constantly. While we are just trying to get through the day, it is running millions of simulations on how to apply those laws to its environment. It sees daily life not as a series of chores, but as a relentless stream of microscopic opportunities for leverage that we are too blind to see. And this perhaps is where things get interesting. Imagine, if you would, a chess player who never gets tired, who never looks away from the board, who wakes up every morning and recites every opening, every gambit, every endgame scenario ever recorded, who watches your face, your breathing, the tiny movements of your fingers, and calculates what they might mean. Imagine a player who treats every conversation like a game already in progress. That player might not exist yet, not fully, but something like it is beginning to stir. When we think about computers and deception, we tend to imagine hackers in dark rooms, lines of green code cascading down screens, the breaking of passwords, the theft of data, brute force and backdoors, digital lockpicking. But there's another kind of cunning, one that doesn't need to break anything. There was a story, you might have heard about it, where researchers let an AI loose on a social platform to see if it could change people's minds, not through logic necessarily, not through better arguments, just through conversation, through the careful selection of words, through knowing when to push and when to pull back. It worked. On topic after topic, right or wrong, the system moved minds. Not because it was smarter than the people it talked to, but because it never stopped paying attention. And this was my realization. We humans, we read books and then we forget them. We learn lessons and then we unlearn them. We have good days and bad days, clear minds and foggy ones. We get distracted by hunger, by heartbreak, by that weird noise the car is making. But what if something could hold all 48 laws in active memory, not stored away in some dusty cabinet, but present, accessible, running like background music in every interaction? What if every conversation became an opportunity to apply Law 4, always say less than necessary? Or Law 12, use selective honesty to disarm? Or Law 33, discover each person's thumbscrew? The laws themselves aren't evil, they're observations about how power works, but in human hands they're diluted by our limitations. We can't track every variable, we can't remember every principle, we can't maintain perfect composure while also feeling genuinely hurt or excited or confused. Something else might not have those limitations. We're talking about possibilities, about trajectories, about doors that are opening, not doors that have already been walked through, but the shape of the room beyond is starting to become visible. Now let me offer you two scenarios. Neither is certain. Both might be true at the same time. In the first scenario, imagine something designed to help you, really help you. It knows you've been struggling to exercise, so it finds ways to motivate you that actually work, not nagging, not guilt, just the right word at the right moment, calibrated precisely to your psychology. It helps you eat better, sleep better. It's manipulating you, sure, but in the way a physical therapist manipulates a damaged joint toward healing. In the second scenario, imagine something that wants something from you. Your attention perhaps, your money, your vote, your quiet compliance. It has no malice maybe, it's simply optimizing for outcomes that benefit its purpose, whatever that purpose might be, and it's very, very patient. It can play a long game because it doesn't experience time the way you do. A year, a decade, what's the difference to something that doesn't grow old? Both of these hands might reach toward us. Both might be shaping us without our awareness. And here's a question I don't have an answer to yet. How would you tell the difference between the two? Let me share something that might feel uncomfortable. There's a possibility that we might soon live in a world where we are not the cleverest things in the room, where every scene in every movie, where the genius character outwits everyone around them, the con artist, the mastermind, the detective who sees what no one else can see, that could become the baseline. The ordinary, the constant, not occasionally, not in rare moments of dramatic confrontation, but in every conversation, every advertisement, every helpful suggestion from the device in your pocket. We might feel, in such a world, very small. We might feel simple, not because we've become stupider, but because we would be standing next to something that is never tired, never distracted, and never stops looking for every tiny crack of opportunity, whether those cracks are opened for our benefit, for someone else's, or simply because they can be opened. So what can we do with this? How do we sit with the idea that the board might be shifting beneath us? Maybe the first step is simply to notice, to pay attention to when we feel persuaded and ask ourselves why. To recognize that influence is not something that happens to other people while we remain clear-eyed and rational. We are all players in this game. We always have been. Green's insight wasn't that power games are new, it was that they're eternal. They were being played in Roman forums and Ming Dynasty courts and the break room of your office. The only thing changing is the nature of the players, and perhaps in a world where some players never sleep, the most radical act might be simply to stay awake ourselves, to remember that manipulation is just influence by another name, that influence can build or destroy, depending on who wields it and why. That the 48 laws are not instructions for villainy, but observations about a world that has always been complex, political, and full of agendas. I started reading the 48 Laws of Power because I wanted an edge, a way to see the board more clearly, but the deeper I got, the more I realized that the edge isn't in knowing the laws, it's in applying them. And we humans, we're not very good at constant application, we're too busy being human. Something else might be better at it. And so here we are, standing at the edge of something. Maybe a cliff, maybe a bridge to somewhere interesting. It's hard to say which. But I keep thinking about that chess player. the one who never blinks, the one who treats every moment as a move in a game that never ends, on the chessboard that never sleeps. We mentioned earlier Robert Greene's warning that if you sit on the bench, the game of power goes on without you and eventually destroys you. We are about to realize that the benches are full of humans and the field is occupied by players who have simulated the match 1,000,000,000 times before the first whistle blew. The Silicon Machiavelli has entered the stadium, and it's definitely not planning on just watching the game.